and all I wrote down was the word titties with a question mark. I'd forgotten all about it until I was on stage and I got to it, and I was so annoyed and borderline embarrassed with myself that I couldn't help but make fun of myself while I was on stage. But I said something along the lines of, if you're going to write a joke, don't do it while you're drunk. I did that last night, and all I wrote was the word titties with a question mark, and the crowd went beautiful people. Welcome in to another episode of the Homie Love Hour with me, your host, Joe Buck. Take a seat, get comfortable, and stay a while. On today's episode, this is going to be more like the Homie Love half hour because I'm going to keep this one on the shorter side. I want to talk about burnout and mainly how we bounce back from that and find inspiration. Recently, I've been, trying to be more active on social media to promote the podcast, and I see a lot of people posting about, how do people deal with burnout? How do they find inspiration? How do they get past some mental block? So, I want to talk about that today. But before we get to the topic, how's your week going? Tell me about it. The good, the bad, everything in between. Let me know how it's going. I'm here for all of it. And just like I asked you about your week, I'll tell you about my week. It's been busy, it's been hectic, but between work and school and shows and everything else, we're making it happen. Speaking of shows, by the time this airs, we will have one show left, which will be March 31st, back at the Pad in Silverthorne, which is a free open mic. If you have any interest in coming out, telling jokes, playing an instrument, doing some spoken word, interpretive dance, I don't really care. Just come out and enjoy yourself. We like to play a little game called Hot Takes, wherein we ask people to anonymously submit their hot takes. And so far, they have been very, very interesting. Now, like always, the Homie Love Hour is brought to you by our sponsors, which, until I get someone who wants to pay me for this show, it's going to be High Altitude Comedy and Rite of Passage Overnight Oats. High Altitude Comedy is, of course, a stand-up comedy group consisting of Nick Halverson, Timmy Motree, and myself. We are very fortunate to be able to do stand-up comedy and to bring comedy to the Rocky Mountains and allow people something a little bit different, but it also allows them a chance to kind of take a break from life and just enjoy some laughter. And Rite of Passage Oats is, of course, a vegan and gluten-free overnight oats company owned by ya boy. Started off as a passion project, but it has now turned into something much more, and I'm very fortunate to be able to allow an option to people who felt as though prior to this they didn't have anything for breakfast. Everything's, of course, made by me. If you have any dietary restrictions, please just let me know beforehand. But also, if you have any questions, or just any interest in overnight oats or stand-up comedy, you can reach out to High Altitude Comedy on Facebook and Instagram at High Altitude Comedy. You can also reach out to me about overnight oats at riteofpassageoats.com. That's right, R-I-T-E, not right like the direction. Also, two very fun announcements. One, I have stickers. They are currently in production. They will hopefully be here in the next week or two. If you have any interest in picking up a sticker, reach out to me through any of the various mediums that you'd like. Let me know. I will probably sell them for anywhere from $2 to $4 just to cover the cost of them. Then also, I did my first interview that will be available in its entirety on Patreon. I was very fortunate to interview a really good buddy of mine by the name of Josh Mazak. He's a comedian I've done shows with in the past, and It was only supposed to be 20, 30-minute conversation, kind of just like a brief, rundown who he is, what he's about, how he got started in comedy. And it ended up turning into, I believe, 2 hours and 11 minutes of us talking about a little bit of everything under the sun, and also making each other laugh along the way. So if you have any interest in watching it in its entirety, it will again be available on Patreon, patreon.com/The Homie Love Hour. I think subs start at like $2 a month. So I'm not trying to make a cash grab out of this. I just want to be able to pay my producer and then reinvest the money back into the show. I've also got some other guests lined up for future interviews, so I'm unbelievably excited to continue to bring that all to you all. Also, I am unbelievably grateful to say that I, as of today, hit 25 subs on YouTube, and I'm hitting pretty consistent numbers as far as listeners on Spotify. Now, for most people, 25 isn't a large number, but for me, I was surprised once I got past 2. 1 being me and 2 being my producer. So the fact that anyone listens to this or watches this, I am floored by, and I'm forever grateful to anyone who gives this a listen or a watch in passing or sits down. I've been told by people that they have been binging the episodes, which fills my heart with so much joy to know that people are enjoying the content enough to come back and keep watching and listening in. All right. So now that we've gotten sponsors, stickers, announcements, all that jazz out of the way, I want to talk about finding inspiration. How do we find inspiration? How do we overcome that writer's block or that mental wall, right? Now, as a quote unquote creative, I'm very introverted. So I find different ways to express myself. Sometimes it's writing stories, sometimes it's writing poetry, sometimes it's writing a joke. 1 or 5 times I've started pilots for TV shows. I never went anywhere, but it's the idea of letting that creativity out. And I've realized when I don't let it out, it's like an itch under my skin that I can't scratch. And it feels like this pressure is building up inside of me, and I need to let it out. And I feel that come back every time I hit that wall, where it's how do I execute this idea? How do I make this work? How do I come up with this punchline for this joke? How do I make this cohesive? And I can tell you, not being able to finish a story or finish a joke sometimes it feels so defeating not being able to do that, to the point where it will make you apathetic and it makes you feel as though you want to give up. But if there's one thing we do here at the Homie Love Hour, it's not give up. So I want to share ideas with you how we can reignite that flame for that thing that we want to do. Now, I've mentioned that I'm a very introverted person, so I spend a lot of time in my own head. So a big part of my day is having conversations with myself. Now, that is where a lot of my jokes come from. I look at things and sort of pick them apart, and I think about what would be funny to me and what would be the most ridiculous thing that could happen in this situation that nobody would expect. And I've also mentioned in the past, I take real life stories, real situations that I've been in, and I like to give them a happy ending or a funny ending. That's the beauty of art, is it's sometimes better than real life. Sometimes I don't know how to properly word something. I don't know how to build it up. I don't know how to transition from the beginning to the middle to the end. I don't know how to make it cohesive. On a good day, I go for a walk. I put my headphones in, I put my sunglasses on, I put the dog on his leash, and we just walk until he gets tired and has to turn around. There was one time where we got pretty far and I realized I didn't have any water. It was a whole thing. Walking, for me, with my headphones in, my sunglasses on. It allows me to disconnect from that process. And maybe something happens while I'm walking where I start to pick that apart and I can apply it to the joke that I'm working on at that moment. Or maybe nothing happens and I just get my steps in. But either way, sitting at my computer, typing, or sitting here with my notebook, stressing out and scribbling shit out doesn't help. It doesn't do anything for me. When it comes to writing jokes, I'm very fortunate to have Timmy and Nick and other comedians that I've come in contact with where I can bounce ideas off of them. And sometimes things just come up organically in conversations. Because a big thing that you can do to find inspiration when it comes to being creative, you guessed it, to engage in conversation. And according to this article that I found, it states that sometimes talking to others, especially those with different perspectives, can help spark new ideas. Engage with people who inspire you or even those you don't typically converse with, as their viewpoints might challenge and expand your thinking. Now, I've got friends in my life that definitely challenge me on a daily basis. And I'm very fortunate for that, because when you look at things from a singular perspective, you only see things from that perspective. So when someone says no, you're looking at a 6, not a 9. You're like, no, and you begin to argue it. At a certain point, you might decide to stand next to them to see what they're seeing. And stupid analogy, sure, but it's that ability to see things differently that allows you to potentially find a more creative approach to what it is that you're working on. Now, again, with my short stories and poems and all those other things, I can get a bit wordy. Hell, this podcast is me being wordy all the time. So sometimes when talking conversations with friends and I bring these things up, sometimes I realize, like, holy shit, I just spent 5 minutes talking about this particular thing that didn't need to be there. Or sometimes, if my friends are kind of over my nonsense, they'll tell me, like, bruh, you didn't have to do that. You spent 5 minutes talking to me about the setting. You could have said 2 words or 3 words. We were outside. That sets everything up. They don't care about the trees, the dog walking down the street, the cars passing by. None of that stuff, none of the peripheral things are important. And sometimes cutting all of that extra stuff out allows you to see things a bit differently. Now, along with going out, going for a walk, being in nature, talking to your friends, an important thing to do that I am learning now as I'm getting older is meditation. Whew, boy, I love me some meditation. I do meditation and I do yoga. Don't let the size fool you. Your boy is getting flexible again. But doing those things where you are physically engaging the body, but you're mentally detaching, it silences the noise and the voices. It's kind of like, for me, just me, my brain is like the busiest highway you've ever been on. During rush hour, every car is honking, everyone's trying to get over, it's hot as shit, the AC in your car is broken, everything just sucks at once. Doing meditation with or without yoga is more like driving at night. The breeze is going, your windows are down, your favorite song is on, and you're just doing that thing you used to do when you were a kid, when you just do this with the wind, and it makes sense. And all of a sudden, that noise is gone. And I can focus on what I want to focus on. Sometimes it's nothing. It's absolutely nothing. Even now, thinking about that, I'm calm. I could just stop talking, stare in the camera, and smile. It would creep everybody out, myself included, and my producers. We would have to go back and edit this at some point. Turning off that noise de-stresses you. And I like to back up my views with science. So, according to the Mayo Clinic, for the benefits of meditation, it gives you a new way to look at things that cause stress. It helps you build skills to manage your stress. It makes you more self-aware. It allows you to focus on the present. It reduces negative feelings. It helps you be more creative. It helps you be more patient. It lowers the heart rate. And it helps you sleep better. How does that sound? You're stressed, you're tense, you're frustrated because This idea doesn't make any sense. Now you practice some breathing exercises. You close your eyes, in through the nose, out through the mouth. You stop fidgeting. You sit still. You lower that tension you may carry in your shoulders. You just chill out for a second. You just chill. And all of a sudden, things make more sense. Those ideas that you were wrestling with, they don't seem so insurmountable anymore. They're holding you back less than you thought. Because you realize oftentimes when it comes to losing inspiration, that roadblock or that wall, you put it there. You just don't know how to get past it. So the easiest way to get past it is to unlearn it. Just like, you know what? Let me reapproach this. And maybe during meditation, that little light bulb above your head just bing, and you're like, oh, I didn't even think of that. Why am I stressing about this? And it feels good, man. Like it feels good to not be stressed. You know, it's easier said than done, believe me. But just like positive affirmations, meditation takes time and it takes effort. And it is something that I still work on to this day. Before, I would try to meditate and I would just fall asleep. That's how zen I was getting before. So now I have to make an active effort to stay awake, but I want to meditate because I want to clear my mind and I want to think better. I want to approach things differently. And honestly, lowering my blood pressure, probably not a bad thing. Now, the bad thing about doing everything in my head is oftentimes when I lose a thought, it's gone. It's like a balloon in the wind. But when I write things down, I now have a physical marker of whatever I was thinking about at that time. And this was something that I started to do when I lived in Alaska. I challenged myself to write a poem every day for, I think it was like 4 months, 5 months. It didn't have to be the same topic every day. It was whatever inspired me on the day at that time. So sometimes it was the weather. Sometimes it was a person. Sometimes it was something that I saw. And the only thing worse than having an unfinished poem or story is forcing an ending that doesn't work. So I have notebooks, maybe 3, 4, just full of unfinished ideas for whatever I was working on that day. And a big part of this journey of being more aware and being more mature is revisiting those poems or short stories or pilots that I started writing. Sometimes they're even jokes. Going back and revisiting them, because before I would look at the notebook and I would cringe because I'm like, God, I don't want to look at how I was thinking at that time. I don't want to revisit those emotions that I had at that time. But now I go back and I look at them and I'm like, damn, Depressed Joe had some great ideas. This guy, this notebook, one of them, this guy had some ideas. Let me tell you, some real edgy jokes in there. Probably never see the light of day, but I wrote them down. Now I might water them down, maybe tame them back a bit, but that's material. But it's wonderful to be able to see who you were at a different time, because that same idea that you may have had years ago, weeks ago, whatever the case may be, may still be there, but now you're a different person, so you know how to approach it. And maybe you can look back at something and go, oh, my perspective has changed along with my approach. So now I get it. Now I can solve this riddle that I created for myself without knowing the answer. And it clicks. And now you've got your beginning, your middle, and your end. You've got your cohesion. And oh my God, that dopamine hit of finishing a poem or finishing a story. Oh my God. It's amazing. Sometimes for jokes, when I'm writing them, I have multiple endings. And for me, each one might be funny in its own way. I like to play around. So when I'm doing open mics, I'll test each version of a joke that I have and see which one hits most consistently. Sometimes it's not just A, B, or C. Sometimes it's A1, A2, A3, broken down into pieces, and you're moving stuff around. You know, it's like you got to experiment. You can't just say, okay, this whole thing works. Because if it worked the first time, it'll work the second, the third, the fourth. You just go back and experiment. I'm not saying obsess over it, because that's where a lot of people mess up, is they want to create this perfect thing, so they tear it down to the point where the original piece that it was is completely gone. So if you're working on a particular topic or joke or story, poem, and it's starting to turn into something else, make it its own thing. Don't destroy this piece of art that you have to create something completely different. Start over with a blank canvas and take those ideas, the structure of those ideas, and transfer them over, if that makes any sense. Now, thanks to being in the world of social media and everything being digital, sometimes when I feel inspired, but I don't always know where I want to take something, like a joke, for example, or story. I love a good story. Oh my God, like it does something to me. So whenever I'm working on a story, I like to listen to serial podcasts because I want to hear a great story. A great story has the ability to envelop you, where you are detached from the present and you're somewhere, wherever the setting is for that story, that's where you are. And I'm very fortunate to be able to talk to an amazing writer and author and the creator of Weeping Cedars. I found the podcast by mistake, and I have consequently listened to not only Weeping Cedars multiple times, but I've listened to the offshoots, most recently Rod of Amber, waiting for the next season to come out. He's now working on books, Lightning Falls, the books. I plan on reading those too because I love the story. I love the setup. I love the character building. I love the world building. I love all of it because it pulls me in to the point where it's not that I want more, it's that I feel as though I need more. And for a lot of people who are now creating podcasts and doing stories and things like that, that's their goal, myself included. But I don't always know how to get there. I know where I'm at and I know where I want to be, but there's a lot of space in between those two things. So I got to figure out how to bridge those gaps to get there. So it's worth it to look at what someone else is building. And sometimes you can build on that structure. Sometimes you can look at what they're doing and say, okay, that makes sense. I'm not saying steal someone else's work. I'm not saying plagiarize anyone else, but find the inspiration in what they're doing, because if someone else has done it, you can do it too. When I was younger, I never thought I could be funny. I never thought I could have a conversation with people because I was so bad at it. Like, it was not my thing. For some people, it came naturally. For me, I struggled. So I began to watch my brother and watch my dad and watch the men in my family. And I watched how they interacted with people and I emulated that. As I got older and I discovered comedy, there were so many comedians that I enjoyed watching when I was a kid, but I loved the comedians that could tell stories in their comedy. Because as much as I enjoy laughing, again, I love a good story. So, Lewis Black, he would yell and shake his hands, but he always had a story that he was telling when he was doing this. And, I loved, watching the crowd's reaction and seeing that expectance of seeing how the story was going to pay off. And then when I got to college, I discovered Mike Birbiglia. And his non-linear storytelling forces you to pay attention. It forces you to create these strings that connects all the stories. And he would start at the punchline, and then he would tell all these other stories. And before you know it, you're right back at the punchline. So you're right back at the beginning. It's like being caught up in a whirlwind. You're like, how did I get here? I want to do it again. I may have been lost in the sauce, but goddamn did it taste good. And then I discovered the brother Ali Sadiq and his raw, visceral approach to comedic storytelling, of telling things about his life. I felt as though he was talking to me. Now, granted, we haven't walked the same paths, but it was close enough where when I watched his first special that he released on YouTube, The Domino Effect, I listened to it every day for a month straight because every time I felt as though he was talking to me. It felt like he was in my living room with a microphone and a chair. And I was like, man, I was blown away. Like, this is amazing. I've subsequently watched every single Domino Effect special since then. I've gone back and watched his older stuff. Can I connect to all of it? No. Do I want to connect to all of it? No. But as a person who tells stand-up jokes and a person who loves stories, his style is exactly the style that I want to emulate. I can't be the brother Ali Siddiq. I'm not going to prison for anybody if I have a say in it. But I can make my story my own and still have that same effect on the crowd. And that's my goal, you know? Like whenever I do shows with other people who don't know me, they always tell me the same thing, which is that my approach to jokes feels more like I'm just telling stories that happen to be funny. And then I let things hang in the air. And we sit in the joke. When I first started doing comedy, I had all these stories. There's one story I told about the time my uncle got me into a fist fight. And because I didn't write anything down, I would go on these long tangents whenever I would do this joke. And I remember one time I recorded it. It was 42 minutes of me just talking about the build-up to the story, not even talking about the story itself. So I would need an hour on stage just to tell this one story. And who cares about 42 minutes of build-up to a 3-minute payoff? I'm sure there are some people that do, but for the average person, it doesn't do anything for them. And then we started doing shows with people from Denver, and it would just be one-liner, 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 and their pace was incredible. Like I was like, I'm throwing this notebook away. I'm never writing another joke. I'm hanging it up because I can't keep up with the pace of this other person. But I had to learn not to compare myself to these other people. And I found a happy medium between the two, where I do shorter, condensed stories that all tie together, and there's an overarching theme to whatever the topic I choose to be. That's what works for me. Now, the thing to remember is that whatever your creative outlet is, it is your own. So you have to make it your own. This creative outlet is an expression of you. You are taking a piece of yourself and you're putting it out for the world to see. And I can tell you, it is always easier to copy someone else's homework. But at a certain point, people are going to notice. And that authenticity in your product, that is how you find the people that you're going to connect with. That is how you show people what you're about. Now, people could watch me and they could watch Ali Siddiq and say he's just ripping him off. But my stories are my own. No one can be me. I've had people that have done shows with me try to be me on stage, and it doesn't work for them. They don't understand it. And that's because it's not them. They're not being true to themselves. And a big part of being inspired is being true to yourself. Because if you don't care about what you're putting out, then it's never going to matter what it is. But when you are putting yourself into a song, into a poem, into a short story, into a joke, you're living it. It is you speaking your truth. And honestly, it is the best thing that you could do. And there are times where it might feel horrible to be vulnerable or to be open or to be honest. But truthfully, when whatever you're creating, when that honesty and that vulnerability and that truth come out, the people who are there for you are going to flock to that. And that's why I'm doing it. I don't know why other people are doing what they're doing. Maybe they just think creating a podcast is a good cash grab. Maybe they heard a certain song by an artist and they're like, I can do that. Maybe someone heard a Louis C.K. joke and was like, I can do the same thing. You could, but it's not you. And in this world of pretenders and knockoffs, why not be genuine? Why not be authentic? Why not be the real you in your product, in your creative expression, whatever the case may be? There's one piece of advice I can give you. If you have something written down or recorded, go back and revisit it. You will be surprised with how close you were to solving the riddle. There was one time where I was inebriated and I grabbed my notebook and I decided I was gonna write a joke. To this day, I have no idea what it was about. I have no idea what the setup was, what the punchline was, but I remember thinking, sober me will get this. and all I wrote down was the word titties with a question mark. I'd forgotten all about it until I was on stage and I got to it in my set list, and I was so annoyed and borderline embarrassed with myself that I couldn't help but make fun of myself while I was on stage. And I don't remember exactly what I said, but I said something along the lines of, if you're going to write a joke, don't do it while you're drunk. I did that last night, and all I wrote was the word titties with a question mark. And the crowd went crazy. Best hitting joke of my entire set. I had the art the whole time. I just didn't appreciate it, but it took me making fun of myself to realize this simple one word with a question mark hit better than everything else I had put weeks or even months of preparation into. So maybe drunk me knew that. And it was like, let me leave this poor guy some little word of inspiration. Go back. If you have anything written down or you have something recorded, go back and revisit it. See what you were thinking or saying at that time. Maybe it is dog shit and you just delete it. Maybe there's something there that you feel like you can work with and you make it better. But you won't know until you go back and revisit it. Maybe you have something right now that you're working on that you're scared to put out. Fucking put it out. Worst case scenario, when you put something out, you just delete it. No harm, you just delete it. If you have some sort of mental block, go meditate under a tree. Go to a park. Go for a walk. Talk to the people in your life that you trust and whose opinions and perspectives matter to you. It's like we're too busy staring at a tree to recognize the forest around us. Before I start every episode of this podcast, I put on some music. I choose something different every day. Today, it's Metronomy, Love Letters, one of my favorite songs. Last time I recorded, it was Lost Dog Street Band. Time before that, I put on Roast Me by All Def Digital. And I just listen to dudes roast each other for 30 minutes because it makes me want to be better at roasting people. There's no perfect answer to where you'll find inspiration from or how you'll overcome that mental block. All I can do is throw out ideas and hope that one of them resonates with you. Maybe you have a better idea. Good friend of mine, Kristen, told me on days where she feels like she's not inspired, she does what she calls opposite day. So instead of brushing her teeth with her left hand, she does it with her right. Instead of opening the fridge with her left hand, she does it with her right. And she told me that this simple thing provides her with a different perspective that she never saw before. Because sometimes you have to break that routine to realize just how simple something can be. Or just how different things can be when you approach it differently. You won't know until you try. And you see, I want to see the homies succeed. I want to see you all flourish. The same way I hope you all want that for me. But if we're scared to be inspired and to let that inspiration show, how can we ever flourish? I told one of my friends, we were recently talking about our time in Alaska, and I had to take the time to thank her because literally without her, I don't think I would have gotten through that second summer. So I told her I would thank her personally. So Tony, thank you. I may have done it 1,000 times when we were in Alaska, but thank you. I think this is a good spot to end tonight. Maybe it wasn't as funny, maybe it wasn't as deep or insightful as you would like, but I felt inspired and this feels cohesive. I had a message that I wanted to pass along and I did just that. In record time too. Homie Love Half Hour is what this episode is probably going to be called. Who fucking knows? But let that inspiration out. Let it flow through you. You know, even if it's just a little spark, nurture that spark. Let that flame build up in you and let it out. If it's with a keyboard, pen to paper, just, you singing, playing an instrument, a story, a dance, just do it. Worst case scenario, you hate it. Best case scenario, you fucking love it. So like always, I have been your host, Joe Buck. This has been the Homie Love Hour. And as I like to end every episode, just remember this. Be good to yourself. Be good to the world around you. And remember, above all else, I love you, homie.